Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff, and welcome to part 7 in our Endeavour build by Amati. And in today we're going to be tackling figure 6, and just a reminder, we're tackling figure 6 and figure 5 slightly differently than suggested in the instructions, and that's because I want to simplify how that's being done. So just a recap and a reminder, because we're going to be doing things slightly differently. In the last video, what we did is we sprayed down our white ready for masking, and actually in the instructions what it was asking us to do was to paint the white stripe on, mask off, paint the white stripe on, then mask off the white stripe, take your previous masking off, and then paint the blue. So that was creating a bit of work. So what we're doing is we've sprayed the white on, then we're going to mask the stripe off, and then we're going to spray over it with the blue, and that'll be a simpler process. So that's just a recap on where we are up to. So let's read what the instructions tell us for figure 6. Apply several layers of colour until the white covers perfectly the grey tone of the putty. So what they're saying is spray the white on, do thin layers, let each one dry, then do another until you're happy that you've got a nice bright white and it's not being darkened by the grey of the primer. Yeah. Let the paint dry completely between one layer and the next. When the last paint layer is perfectly dry, remove the mask. So that's the bit we've already done. We've painted the white on, we're now ready for masking. Now proceed to mask the white band with the adhesive tape, making it adhere uniformly to the hull. So that's our next step. Paint the hull with the flat dark blue. They've suggested Tamiya AS8, which they say is RAL 502. I'm not going to, but that's the AS range is a rattle can. I can't use a rattle can indoors, so we're going to be doing something different. Apply several layers, letting the paint dry completely between one layer and the next. Once the whole paint job is completely dry, apply a transparent finish using Tamiya TS13 Clear, which again is a rattle can, and we won't be doing that, but we will be applying a clear coat. What used to be called a varnish is now a clear coat. So it's just terminology, really. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be airbrushing this. We're going to be airbrushing it with a blue paint. We'll talk about that when we come to do it. But you can see how this is simple, much more simple, because what Amati have asked you to do from step 5 is mask off, paint the white stripe, then take those masks off and remask what you've done on the white stripe and paint the blue. By doing it this way, by just putting the paint down in a broad stripe, what we've done is we've given ourselves the ability to just put the paint down without having to use lots of masking tape and take time doing that, and then just mask the white stripe off, which you have to do anyway. So we're just cutting out a bit of the process. So we're at the stage now where we can apply the mask to this. So that's the next thing to do. So let's have a look at that, and we're going to need our plans for the first time, I think. Now, when you finish putting your white paint down, it's worth just going in and making sure that any imperfections have been sanded back down. So between each layer, when it's dry, if you've got a dust or a hair or something, it happens, that's got in and you're not happy with it, you can sand it down. Now here, I've managed to get paint on here which might be a bit lumpy and might show when we put the blue down, so I just want to sand that off. I'm using a 2000 grit and I'm just making sure it's nice and smooth, and then I'm running my finger over it, and yeah, I can't feel any lumps. So yeah, it's just worth checking. Here I got a bit of spatter, So that's lumpy, and I want to just take that out as well. There you go, nice and smooth. So it's always worth checking your work, double checking your work, and getting it where you want it to be. And we want this to be nice and smooth, because when you've got a little imperfection in there and you've gone and done a gloss on your hull, what's going to happen is the light's going to bounce off that imperfection and it's going to draw your eye to it, and you're going to see it, and it's going to stand out like someone's poked you in the eye. So it's worth just going over and getting any imperfections out. It might be a little bit time consuming, but the payoff is your finish will be amazing and you'll be super proud of what you've done. So we've got to do some masking off next, and before we do that, we've got to understand where we're masking off. So we need our plans, and getting this on camera is going to be an interesting challenge. So we have a 1-to-1 scale plan of the position of the white line. Let's see. There we go. Right, now let's just see how much of that I've managed to get in camera. Oh, all of it. Okay. I can't see the camera. The camera's above me, so I have to actually get up from a chair and look onto my iPad at my screen to see what you can see. So yeah, I have got that all in. So we've got a waterline here. Yeah, it says waterline. The bottom line is the waterline. And the white line, it's called a boot line on a warship. I don't know whether it is on a sailing yacht, to be honest. But what we need to do is we need to measure that and understand the depth in the first instance. And we also need to understand its position. So let's do that. So I'm using a transparent rule because it's easier to see what you're doing. But an ordinary rule will do. And I'm just going to have a look. And we're measuring the distance between the inside edges of the black lines is what we're doing. And that gives me 2.5 millimeters. And we'll just check that is the same everywhere else. Yes. And yes. Now, I'm going to have a look in a minute off camera to see if they show you a shot of the stern, because the stern is going to be tricky to mask off. And hopefully they show us a picture in scale. If not, then we're going to have to work through that. So we know that it's 2.5 millimeters. So our masking tape needs to be 2.5 millimeters. And the bad news is nobody makes 2.5 millimeter wide masking tape. To my knowledge, they tend to be in full millimeters. So you might get, you'll certainly get 1, you might get 2, you might get 3, but you ain't going to get 2.5. You've got a couple of options. You can either use 2 runs of 2 millimeter and have them overlap, which is probably the easiest way of doing it. Or you can take 3 millimeter and cut it down, which is very, very tricky. Not impossible, but very tricky. So we'll have a look at what tapes I've got and talk about those solutions in a minute. Now, more importantly, we need to understand where we're putting the white line. So we're going to start with, let me get a pencil. I'm going to start with some points that we can absolutely take as a reference. And when you look at our hull, we've not got any of this on here at the moment. So our only real reference point is this corner here, where we've got the corner of the rudder, because that is in our hull. So we can use that as a reference point. And if I line that up on the top of our upper line there. And I want to measure the distance to the top of the hull. So making sure that's nice and straight. Yeah, that's a little tricky to see, but there. Okay, so we are at 10 millimeters there, 15, 16, 17, 18. So between those 2 points, at this point, it's 18 millimeters. Now, obviously, the shape of the hole means that's not going to be the same all the way through. So if I measure here where it disappears at the off the side profile, we are at 15, 16, 17, also 18. That's handy. And then if we do this point here, which is where it meets at the bow, you can see we're at 21 to 23.25. We're not going to be that accurate, but we'll call it 23 at least. So we're at 23 at that point. And we're at what? 22 there. 20 there. So we're going to have to try and get the stripe straight using this as our reference point. Now, I'm going to have a quick look off camera and see if we've got something that deals with a top-down view or a bottom-up view of the white line. I suspect we haven't. So I have tapes in all sorts of thicknesses, and having tapes in different thicknesses can be really useful for all sorts of jobs, whether it be covering big areas quickly or whether it be being able to cut small pieces off for small masking jobs. But like I say, the issue is you're either going to have something undersized or oversized for your jobs. So this is a millimeter. It's tricky to work with. The tape itself comes off the center spool and all sorts of stuff. It's tricky tape to work with, but it's a millimeter, and we could put a row of that, then measure the different distance and put another row on the bottom, and then fill the end either with more 1 millimeter tape or fill the middle with masking fluid. There's different ways we could do it. It's a lot of work, but that's one option. It's not the option I'm going to use. These are 3 millimeter tapes. One of them is curvy. This is a product by Tamiya, and it's a flexible tape because it's not. It's manufactured from a sort of plastic that allows you to create a curve. You can sort of stretch it, and it stays sharp, which is really handy. And we might be using some of that. And this is just ordinary modeler's masking tape. So the sort of stuff you can get it from different manufacturers. Tamiya make a lot of it, but it's basically Kamoi tape, which is a low-tack modeler's tape. And this is 3 millimeters. These are both 3 millimeters. So we've got two options. We could ignore the 0.5 millimeter, make our life easy, and go with the 3 millimeters. No one's ever going to know, just you and me, so we'll keep it to ourselves. Or you could get a wider tape, something like this. This is 15 millimeters, and you could put it onto one of these cutting boards. So these have different thicknesses. So those are 1 millimeter, those are 0.9, 0.8, and so on. But if you put it on the 0.5, you could do easily add that up to 2.5. You lay the tape out, and you just go in with a sharp knife. Let me show you. With your tape laid down, and you just run it through the desired grid point, and you can cut it easily to length, nice and sharply. So if you absolutely want to have the 2.5 millimeters and it be perfect, that's what you can do. I'm not going to do that either. for simplicity, and because I'm trying to do this as sort of a beginner's build, I'm going to use the 3mm tape. Now I'm going to use a combination of both of these because this is great for forming curves, but it's not good for doing straight lines. So I only use it where I have to. This is brilliant for straight lines, but it's no good for doing curves, and we are going to have some curves. So let's get our hull. Let me clear the decks, and we'll have a look at what we're going to do, because this bit here is going to be our problem bit, as you will see. Right, measuring a depth on a hull can be tricky because hulls aren't designed with modelers in mind. So they're designed with the dynamics of water flow in mind. So we've got all these curves that we've got to deal with, and we've got to measure a depth down on a curve. And if you've not got my fancy acetate clear rule that I can use, then you've probably got one of these, and that becomes very difficult. So we want 18mm down. I've got to hold it, and then I've got to roll it, and has that moved? It's very, very difficult. And we want to measure from this point here. So the way to do it is with some paper. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to get a piece of paper. I've actually cut this off the margin of the plans. So you've got blank paper to hand. You don't need to worry about how straight the cutting is. What we're interested in is this edge here. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure 18mm from the end, which is there, because we know that's the depth at our only reference point on the hull. And I'm going to measure it at the edge there, and draw a line. So that's our depth mark, 18mm from the top of the hull. Now we're going to take this strip of paper, which is, I've not measured it, it's just longer than we need, and I'm going to place it at our point. Oh, by the way, it's worth getting a couple of rolls of rolled up dishcloths or something to rest your model on so it doesn't rock around. So you can see here, I need to make that a bit flatter, so I'm going to roll that up a little bit more. There we go. So we start by locating that corner, which is our reference point. And then we need to drag it down, so that is at the very top edge of our hull, which it nearly is. A little tug. There we go. So that is straight, and I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape that I cut off in readiness and just tape that into position. So that is now marking out our 18mm line. So I'm going to take another bit of tape and I'm going to tape that so it doesn't move. So that is our top of our waterline, and I'm going to mark it not with pencil because that could end up being visible. I'm going to mark it with a little bit of tape. So I'm going to get the tape on the line there and plop that on. So that's our top edge, and that's our white line, and this is going to be the thickness of our white line. I'm also going to put some tape on this side so you can see it's marking out the direction. Okay, so that's our top edge of our white line. I can now remove that and remove, easier said than done, that. Just just take the tape off, and then if I get some tweezers, I can carefully fold that back. We're not losing the line because the tape was long enough, and plop that there and peel it off there. Right, so we've got our top edge of our waterline marked out now, so we can put our tape against there for marking out. But we also wanted to get it correct at this end as well. So where the line goes off, it was, I forget the number, 20 something, 23.25. Well, we're just going to measure 23. So going to use the same edge because it's an absolute straight edge. It was the edge of the paper, and we're going to mark it up to, if I put it on the edge of the grid on my cutting mat, which is getting a bit more difficult because it's wearing away where I've spilt stuff on it and it's dissolved away. And we do 23 there, and once again measure that close to this edge on the other side. So 23 there. Draw a line. So that's our depth where the white line comes off. So let's just have a little play with that. So we can now move that, keeping that completely flush with the top. There you go. Our line is disappearing off there. So that's about the point where it should be 23. So once again, holding it in place so it doesn't slip, I'm going to tape that in place on the top. And I'm actually going to wrap this around the hole now and tape it down on the other side. And we'll do exactly what we did before. Now I'm using some offcuts of old tape, but you can snip a length of new tape if you like. And we're just going to, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a longer bit of tape, and you'll see why in a sec. I'm going to follow that paper line, that pencil line I should say. There you go. So know that is straight, and then we can pull the paper off and press that back down. So I now have a reference point at 2 points for our masking tape. So in theory, I can run masking tape from there woof, right across. So let's have a go. Putting a straight line on is more difficult than it should be. So we're going to start there. I'm going to have an overhang of tape. And I'm going to make sure it's not overlapping the tape we've put down. I think that's good. And then we are going to line up with the bottom of our tape here. And again, making sure we're not overlapping. Just make sure that's pressed down nicely. There we go. That looks good, doesn't it? And you can see that's within our white band, although only just in places. I wasn't as good at that as perhaps I should have been. And let that just follow its natural line, and then we can cut the tape off and just tuck it over the edge there. So that's our first white line on, and here we want to just stick it down over the top. We'll deal with correcting all of that in a minute. Right, so that is done. I can now remove my guide tapes, and I have a white line there that is now masked up, ready to go. So run your finger over it, make sure it's nicely pressed down. We'll take our other guide tapes off and we can redo those on the other side. So I'm going to mask up the other side now, and then I'm going to come back to you when we deal with the shaping of that white line at the bow and stern. So there you go, first white line on, happy with that. So as I was looking at this, as I was closing that shot, I thought that doesn't look right. It seems to be going up. So as this disappears, it should be 18. So it's already higher than the 18. So at this point here, I think, it's already starting to go off. So at this point here, the tape is going out of shape. So I'm just going to undo it. I told you it wasn't easy. And lie it that way, like so. So we've got to follow the curve in. Yeah, so even that's a little bit high. Lie it again. Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. So you can see that the line drops, but that's to keep it looking aesthetically straight. So told you it was tricky, and you just have to keep having a play with it until you're happy. So it's definitely too low there. So I had that right, and then I've undone it, which is a shame. So you just keep playing with it until you've got it looking right. And you can see that's curving in, following the shape of the curve underneath the hull. And then when we do it the other side, that's going to cross over, and then we're going to have to look at how we shape that. But it takes a little bit of time to get it right. You've also got a curve in there, but what you want to do is when you look at it side on, it look like a straight line. And I think we've got it. I think. Right, I'm going to do the other side and then I'll come back to you. So the final thing I want to say about marking out the line before we deal with the bow and the stern marking is that if you are an experienced wooden model ship maker, then you've probably got one of these tools, which is a waterline marker. This is actually an Amati tool, I seem to remember. Yeah, it says Amati underneath. And what it basically does is you can loosen this little nut here, and you can see it's holding a pencil, and you can adjust it, adjust the height, and you can mark a waterline. So you've got your model like that, and you basically can draw a line. So you set it at a height and you can draw a line, and then you can put your tape on following that line. So if you've got one of these, then absolutely, and that's going to mark out your line. But I'm assuming that most people doing this will be beginners and don't have the tool. So it's just, as much as anything, it's to stop people saying in the comments, oh, you want to get one of these tools? Yes, I have one, but I'm trying to do this as a beginners and assuming some people don't have those tools. But if you've got one of these, then absolutely use it. If you make model ships and you've not got one of these, then absolutely go and get one. They're brilliant and they cost very, very little. I've had this for years. You can see this was nice and shiny when I bought it, and it's tarnished over the years. You don't use them very often, but the moment you use them, you're really pleased you've got one. So definitely worth having, and you can get these from the Amati shop. So now we need to deal with removing excess tape and making sure we've got the line correct. So we've got a little cross here where the two tapes have overlapped each other, and our meeting point here is pretty much where our line needs to be. So what I'm going to say is, if you push the tape down and get right up so that you've got a little ridge where you can see the tape terminates, you want to just gently take a very sharp knife blade, so a fresh blade or a freshly sharpened blade, and just follow the line so that you can remove the excess tape. Like so. And that gives us a nice crisp line. I've just noticed there's a hair stuck under the tape, so I'm just going to remove that. As soon as I put my magnifying glasses on, I see things that need to be sorted. Somehow I've got hair on there, and we'll do that on the same edge here, and you can actually hear it cutting through the tape. You get a sort of crackly noise, which means that the tape has been cut through. There we go. So that gives us our point at the bow, and if you've done it right, it will be exactly on this ridge line. If it's not on the ridge line, you've done it wrong. Go away and do it again. Right. On the stern, it's very different. So we don't want to have a sharp point on the stern. We want something that follows this curve, is what we actually want. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to trim the tape off to start with, following the line like so, and then we can remove those. Okay, but what we want is a nice curve that goes round there. So we want something a little bit wider, because what we're going to do is we're going to put a curve in and then put a curve in underneath. Now you could use this tape because you can create a curve with this, but I'm not sure I can get one quite as acute as we need, so I'm not going to use that. What I'm going to say is, if you've only got the one thickness of tape, you need to put several layers over the top. So you could do, in fact, let's do that. Let's assume you've only got one thickness of tape. But if you've got other thicknesses of tape, you can just use a single piece. I think possibly one more. Is that wide enough? Yeah, there we go. So you can see we've filled in that area now, and that's going to give us some space to draw in. So first thing I want to do is actually tidy up these edges and make sure that we're not interfering with that line. So I'm just going to, I'm not pressing on, I don't want to go into the plastic. I'm just scoring over the top, and then several passes. Like I say, you'll hear that you've sort of cut through, and then you can lift the excess off. So making sure that's nice and crisp. Okay, so there's our line. Now we need to bring the artist out in you, and you want to get yourself a pencil. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw a curve reminiscent of that, and on the top and the bottom, so that we have a nice shape rather than this point. Now, if you're not very artistic and you're a bit worried about this, then just leave it as a point, and it's going to look fine, but it's not correct. So what you can do is try and find something that's curved that will help you get the shape that you want. So there's three ways of going around this. You can draw it freehand if you're confident enough. You can find something that's spherical, like the base of this knife, and put it on and draw around it. Or if you've got one of these, they're really handy. We can put this on and get the curve that we want while seeing what we're doing. So what we need is something that is the sort of the width of the gap. So I'm thinking that looks possibly about right. We're just going to draw it on and see what we think. And then the same here. So we want to go from corner to corner. So if I can show you there, we've gone from that corner to that corner with a curve, and then where the two outside lines meet the curve. So the curve diameter is exactly the same. So yeah, the answer is that the shape that you want? And probably it wants to be a little bit more elliptical, but I think for the purposes of what we're doing here, I'm happy with that. So once again, now we've done that, and again, this is not covered off at all in the instructions. If you can draw it freehand, then make it a little bit more elliptical. I'm going to show you. You want it to be more elongated, like that, and you do the same here. But I think for ease, and for those of you that are beginners, what we're going to do is now just very gently cut out that. In fact, I have a tool for it. Let me show you that tool because it's quite interesting. So this is called a gyro cut, and it's basically a knife that swivels, and it allows you to cut without taking your knife off, so you can see what you're doing. And as you turn, the knife turns with you. And I find it very useful for these sort of jobs. So if you've not got one of those, and I'm guessing most people don't, although you can, if you ever go to the Telford Model Show, they are always selling them there. Then what you need to be doing is just gently cutting it out with the edge of your knife blade until you're happy that you've separated the tape, and then lift your tape off. There we go. So you can see we've got a nice shape there, and I'm just going to follow that round on the top. There we go. So that is something that looks far more realistic. Now, you do a shape that you're happy with and that looks right for you. I'm not sure that's perfect, but I think we'll probably go with it. I might just trim the edges a little bit. I'm going to perhaps have a little play with it. Where we've done the cutting and we've got a little bit of a line mark there, I'm just going to sand that out. There we go. So get it to the shape you want. It's all personal preference, and when you're happy with it, then we're ready to carry on. Now, when you come to paint your hull, if you're brush painting, it's the same as with the white. Lots of thin coats so you don't get the brush marks and build it up. If you're using a rattle can, I'm not very experienced with rattle cans. I believe if you warm them up in a bucket of warm water, that helps. I'm not sure how much it helps, but that's a tip I've been told in the past. But you're basically doing exactly the same thing. Lots of thin coats, let them dry, let the colour build up. And it's not dissimilar if, like I'm about to do, you're using the airbrush. Now, I have to put a respirator on, so I can't really talk while I'm airbrushing. So I'm just going to talk you through my process. Just noticed a raised lump there. First thing is I've blown with the airbrush all the dust and stuff out of this. I only use this when I'm on camera because my paint booth, it's very difficult to film in. So I will start the process here, then I'll finish it in the paint booth, then I'll probably bring it back here so you can see what we're doing. So get your chosen colour of paint. If you're not using the rattle can suggested in the instructions, and I've actually mixed paint for this job. So it's a mixture of Vallejo 7898 dark sea blue and 7899 dark Prussian blue. So I've made a sort of a mix of colours to get it where I'd like. I've got a number 4 needle in here in my airbrush, and we're just going to gently make some passes and build it up in very thin layers, and hopefully that will come down very nice. So it might take you want to leave it at minimum, a very minimum of half an hour between layers. If you can leave it longer, that's better. So it might take you a day or two to complete painting the hull. But if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. Unmasking time, and it's always a moment where you sort of need to hold your breath a little bit and hope that everything went to plan. Hopefully we have. So we're going to start at the stern here, just because it's a bit easier to grab some of this tape that we put down that's lying on top of other tape. Well, so far so good. Right, where's my... Now we have to be really careful here that we don't chip the paint off. There we go. Well, that looks good. I'm happy with that. That's our first line on. I'm just going to turn this round so it's facing me for doing this side. Just sliding the knife blade under, making sure we don't scratch anything, just so there's enough masking tape to grab with the tweezers, and then when you can grab it with your fingers, we can do that. Oh, the tape's ripped. That never happens. That has never happened before. Right, okay. Excellent. So I am happy with that. I can see that there's a very, very, very tiny gap in the tape, and I have a hair's width of blue, about 0.5 millimeter long. So I will just put a dab of white paint over that. But our next job is to clear coat this and give it a gloss coat. So let's have a look at that. So we now need to clear coat it. So what you want is some form of varnish, a gloss varnish for the hull. We'll do something different on the decks. So brand isn't important. Choose one that you like. Ideally an acrylic one, just because it's faster drying and it doesn't have the odor. I'm going to put mine on with an airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush, you can do that by brush. You might want to thin it down and do 2 or 3 coats of it. A little tip is to make sure that you've got something that's not as wide as your deck for this to rest on, so that you don't get that touching anything, because you'll get pooling and it'll spoil your effect. So you want to have it raised up off the ground so that you can spray all the way around it, and you're not going to have any collection points basically. And thin layers, let it dry. Thin layers, don't absolutely cover it, because then you've got the risk of drips and you're going to have to sand it all back and start again if that happens. So I'm going to get on with airbrushing this, and then when it's finished, I'm going to get a small brush and just paint in the edge here. We don't need to worry about airbrushing that so much, and that will give us a nice tough protective cover for this, for the future handling of the model. So just carefully putting some clear coat in on this top edge, and then we'll let that dry, and then we can remove our masking, and that will complete this step really. So that completes figure 6. We will deal with varnishing the deck in a future episode. So let's have a look at what we'll be doing in the next video. So in episode 8, we'll be looking at figure 7, and that is applying some gunwales and a cleat, well, they're calling them a chock, where we'll be needing to reference positions on the plans. So we're starting to build some stuff onto the deck, and we will be sealing the deck after we've added these wood strips. So I will see you in the next episode. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you're enjoying the build. You enjoy your modelling, and I will see you very soon. Hi, and thanks for watching. You can support the channel by hitting the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any content that I put out. Model Kit Stuff is a self-funded channel, and I don't do membership or Patreon or buy me a coffee. So if you'd like to further donate to the channel and ensure the cameras keep rolling and the content keeps coming, then you can consider making a donation through my PayPal. You'll find a link to that in the text below. You enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you soon.